UFO crash recovery programs. They're real. They've been going on for quite some time. In fact, the first one was allegedly the Magenta, Italy UFO crash, which my father may have been personally involved in, where he was in the army and had NATO level cosmic clearance and was stationed in Germany and then was sent down to Italy for some unknown mission. And in one photograph that my family has of him, he is surrounded by people in the background from a joint military operation from the Air Force and the Navy. But what we're going to talk about tonight is Danny Sheehan. He is a UFO insider who got access into the secret files of Project Blue Book, where he claims that he actually saw the files of a UFO crash recovery. And guess what? I think I may have found the actual footage of that UFO crashed in the snow and then filming it back in the 1970s. So first of all, let's hear from Danny Sheehan and what he had to say on Reality Check on News Nation with Ross Coulthart. I also want to give a special shout out to my Patreon Inner Circle. They are listed right here above my head. The Patreon Inner Circle and members of my Patreon team that make a lot of this possible, that personally subscribe to my exclusive content, where I'm trying to do more live streams and post content over there. And we have a live chat that's ongoing on the Patreon page. If you want to know more, make sure and click the link in the description box and go follow me on Patreon.
Can I just take you then very quickly to what happened? I'm going to tell this in a rough, quick form. As I understood it, you insisted on being given access to the hitherto secret unreleased Project Blue Book files. And incredibly, they agreed to do that.
Now, I'm going to be talking over this just a little bit.
Fiat. And as a result of that, and I took great pleasure the other day, I was walking back from
giving my own commentary and thoughts as we go.
And I stood at the Madison building, the very same building where you were given entry before it was even officially opened. Tell me what happened that day when you went to the Madison building in the National Archives. What happened?
Well, what happened is Marcia Smith had told me that I had to bring 2 forms of official photo ID. So I brought my Washington, D.C. driver's license and I brought my passport and I came to the building. I was surprised that nobody had even occupied the building yet. It was brand new. It just gotten built. And there were these 2 suits standing outside of the door waiting for me. They demanded to see both forms of my identification, and I showed them both, and then they showed me in. So I went into the hallway, and they said, go down the hallway to the right, and you'll see an elevator there on the left. And you go down into the basement. And
so he does all of this covertly. He actually sneaks in, takes notes, and sneaks it out past the security. This is quite an amazing story.
Took out a yellow pad and slipped it under my arm, and then closed my briefcase. The elevator arrived in the basement. I got out, and it was dark down there. There weren't lights on, but I could see down the hall. I could see a light coming out of a room, and there were these 2 other suits, these guys, big kind of husky-looking guys that were there. So I go down the hallway. They both of them demanded to see my 2 forms of identification. It was sort of like they resented my even being there. But I showed them, and they said, look, leave that briefcase here. You can't take any notes. You can't record anything. But here the stuff is. They brought the stuff for you. And so I put the briefcase down. Yes.
So I just want to set the scene for this. This is you, Daniel Sheehan, being given access to the darkest, deepest secrets in the American military-industrial complex. You've asked for...
I do want to say also that allegedly, since President Donald Trump gave the orders to release all of the UFO files on everything to do with UAP and aliens, that is also going to get released into the National Archives and is going to be placed there when that happens.
20 feet wide and about 12 feet or so deep. And there were these 3 big cardboard fold-out tables. And they had like shoeboxes, these little light green, kind of government green shoeboxes with the little ties on them. and there was a microfiche machine that was there. And so I sat down and I took the yellow pad out and I slid it over behind one of the boxes so that if they looked in, they wouldn't see it. And I opened up the first box and they had these little
So this happened back in the
canisters of
1970s.
microfiche film. So I took the first one out and I put it into this old-timey microfiche machine and started cranking it and looking at it. It was all these documents. And I said, I don't know how long they're going to allow me to stay in here. And so I said, if I start reading each one of these documents as a lawyer, it's going to take forever. So I sort of cranked through them to see if there were any photographs anywhere. Nothing was there in the first canister. And so I folded it all up and put it back in. And I opened up a second canister, went through it, and they had a lot of documents again. I could see all the official stamps on them and the top secret designations, et cetera. And then I got to the third canister, I think it was, and part way in, there it was. There was this series of photographs, black and white photographs of a crashed flying saucer. There wasn't any doubt about what it was. It was a winter scene. There was snow on the ground, and the saucer, it was a classic large disc saucer, about 40, 50 feet across.
Pay attention to these details.
On the top of it. And it had hit into this snow-covered field and it plowed this big ditch all the way across the field, like the earth was all turned up and it was stuck into the side of this big snow-covered embankment, stuck in there like at a 45-degree angle, just stuck in the side of the hill. And I could see all around it, there were these Air Force personnel. They were in winter jackets, with the big fur around the hood, and they were taking photographs of it. And I actually saw one of the guys in one of the photos. There were like three of them that I saw the photos, and they had one of these old-timey cameras.
So he only saw
with the two big
still photos
canisters on the top of them. So it must have
but
been
there's
like the late 40s,
video
early
cameras
50s
there
or
that he
something,
saw
I
in the
figured.
pictures.
And so that and then all of a sudden I realized that in one of the photos I could see around the bottom of the dome of the crash saucer that was stuck in the embankment, these symbols. And I looked at them and I said, wow, look at those. There's nothing like anything I've ever seen. They're not Russian. They're not Chinese. They're not, hieroglyphics. They're totally unique. So I said, okay, I'm going to trace these because I want to make sure they're absolutely identical to what is there and that they're in the exact sequence that they're in. And so I did is I took out the yellow.
These are top secret files, Denny. Isn't that an act of espionage?
Well, no, I'd been cleared to see them. And so what I did is I took out the yellow pad, and interestingly enough, it's just one of those instinctive things. I opened up the yellow pad to the inside cardboard backing. And what I did is I pushed the backing underneath the microfiche machine and then focused the microfiche.
So he only saw still photos, black and white photos from the Project Blue Book files. But here in a minute, we're going to see the actual video footage.
Totally accurately, every single one of them. And there must have been about 8 or 10 of them that were all obvious. So I traced them in detail and I got them all done. I kept looking up to see if anybody was watching. And so I got all done and I closed the yellow pad and I said, that's it. I got it. That's a UFO, man. And look, it's got all these unique symbols on them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the stuff away. I put the little microfiche away, put it back in the box, took the yellow pad, stood up and put it under my arm. I have my suit on and I didn't put it inside my suit to try to hide it. I just stuck it under my arm and I turned around and got up and walked out. I walked right straight out the door and the two guys were kind of surprised. And I'm surprised and I think about it that I left as soon as I did, but I had the information and I said, I don't want to take any chances at all. So I left, I went out the door and I reached down and picked up my briefcase that was sitting there by the side and I started walking down the hall. And all of a sudden one of the guys said, hold it. Hey, hold it. And I stopped and he said, what is that you got there?
I can't imagine how nervous I would be if I was going through this exact same thing, trying to sneak information out. Actual alien symbols off of an alleged UFO.
And one of them reached over and yanked the yellow pad away from me and then ruffled through all the yellow pages. And there was nothing on them, of course. And then he kind of grumpily handed it back to me. And so I put it back under my arm and just turned around, picked up my briefcase and started walking down the hall. I hope I wasn't whistling. To try to get, but I went down the hallway and got into the elevator. When I got in the elevator, I opened up my briefcase and put the yellow pad in, got up, and went up the stairs, and walked right straight out the door, and went back to Jesuit
Now
headquarters.
listen to how serious he gets here.
So that is 1976 when that happened?
77. That was the spring of 77. This all happened. He got elected in November 76. On November 19th is when he confronted Bush and was refused the information. This was like early spring of 1977.
So 44 years ago, you got to see what you believe is categorical evidence
Listen to this.
of a crash retrieval of a non-human craft.
Well, I knew that these symbols were not from anything I'd ever seen on the planet, and I had a fairly extensive history. But as I say, I knew they weren't Chinese, they weren't Russian, they weren't Hindu, they weren't anything that I'd ever seen. I'd seen a significant amount of things. I studied foreign policy at Harvard College under Henry Kissinger. I studied theology and stuff at the Harvard Divinity School. I'd studied different legal texts. I was, in fact, the legal research assistant for Professor Jerome Cohen, who was the head of the International Law Department at Harvard. So I'd done lots of investigation about Chinese history and Chinese law. Nothing. These symbols were like nothing that I'd ever seen anywhere on Earth.
Now, you're very sure it was US Air Force personnel in what presumably sounded like 1940s uniforms standing around what
Now, this part I think he might be
a
incorrect on. I think it was
flying
actually
saucer.
Russians.
Yes, that's right. Because I recognized the winter garb because I was
Unless
going
it's
to
a
go to the Air
different
Force
clip
Academy.
that he saw, different
So I was pretty
photographs.
familiar with Air Force garb, etc. I said, these are Air Force guys. And these are official Air Force guys, taking photographs and movie footage of this thing. And I knew it immediately when I saw it.
But what's important about this, Danny, is that is, if I'm not mistaken, that is first-hand direct witness evidence from you of a UAP, a flying saucer, a non-human craft.
Well, it was exactly as I said. That I was. There's no doubt that it was a flying saucer. That was absolutely clear, and there wasn't any doubt that it was crashed, and it wasn't any doubt that there were no symbols of anything on Earth that were on it.
Now, like I said at the start of this video, I may have found the actual video footage that Danny Sheehan talked about in that previous clip. He said that he just saw the files on some microfilm and he just saw black and white footage, but what he described was a UFO that was crashed in the snow, in the trees, that had weird unknown alien symbols written on the side, and saw people in military uniforms that were there to collect it. And he said in that he thought it was military from the United States, but the video footage that I saw not only shows exactly what he described, but it took place in Russia. It shows the UFO crash in the snow and also what appears to be an alien autopsy.
This is a copy of the Sverdlovsk newspaper from November the 29th, 1968. An article on the front page entitled Berezovsky Dreams, or What Was That?, gives the state-sanctioned account of what could have been the
Now, I'm not going to talk as much in this one because it's a little bit hard to hear in this archival documentary footage, but this is really fascinating.
Appeared over the horizon and started to move in the direction of the city. 4 of the objects moved in opposite directions, while the 5th began to rapidly lose altitude and soon completely disappeared behind the forest terrain. Several seconds after its disappearance, there was a deafening explosion. And in typical Soviet fashion, the paper cites the official statement. The blast had taken place at the grain storage unit number 27. The explosion was caused by one of the employees who had violated the safety code, resulting in a charge of negligence. He was sentenced to restitution of the material losses suffered by the state. What helps make the account in Vereshchagin's book so compelling is the existence of several reels of film which seem to back up the story. While rumors of such film first began circulating some years ago, it was not until Vereshchagin led us to the black market dealer in possession of these materials that we got our first.
So this was found on the black market, this original footage.
If this film indeed corresponds with Vereshchagin's story, What we are looking at is the scene of the crash site in Berezovsky, as viewed by a camera on top of a military truck. The focal point of this scene is here, and indeed appears to be a disc embedded in the ground. Here we see soldiers exiting the truck, led by a captain. The troops are met by another officer, this one a major, and then they join other soldiers and officers already on the scene. This footage is one of 4 reels of film acquired during our investigation. This film footage certainly seems to depict interest by Russian military personnel in the object that is seen sticking out of the ground. Soldiers, officers, and civilian-clothed agents are deployed around the site, and they appear to be both guarding and examining the object. This is what we found on one of the 4 reels of film obtained in Russia. After viewing the footage, we were able to determine that it was most likely shot with 2 separate cameras, one apparently a handheld camera, which starts out on the approaching truck, and a second one
exactly like Danny
on a
described.
tripod. As the soldiers march past, you can see the cameraman turn to follow the troops. Here we cut to the other angle, the point of view from the tripod camera. And here you see the handheld camera as the truck pulls up. Both cameras change vantage points several times during the film, as if to get better views or perhaps under orders of a superior. From this angle, we see yet more troops arrive. Author Veniamin Vereshchagin describes the event. And here you see the man who is probably the head KGB agent.
There are the symbols, just like Danny described.
A total of almost 1,200 feet of negative were recovered just on this crash site. It is possible that more film was shot, but this is all that we were able to obtain. None of this film depicts the removal of the disc itself, and at no
see them collecting pieces that broke off from the craft and putting them up next to it.
From this angle, we do see the handheld camera shooting behind or inside the disc. However, that footage, if it was in fact ever shot, was not included in the cans of film we acquired. We can only speculate that it may still be at large. We must also speculate on how...
Nobody in this is acting like actors. This doesn't look like a film set.
And what we can see in this footage, we have created this computer-animated version of how researchers believe the crash may have occurred. The questions then become, where did this object come from and how did it come to crash here? And more importantly, what has happened to it since? So it was with a sense of both excitement and caution that we examined the footage recently recovered in Russia. This reel contains images of what appears to be a scientific or medical examination
Here's the
of
autopsy
organic
footage.
body parts. The individuals seen here appear to be forensic pathologists or biological research scientists. Speaking in Russian, they are seen inspecting the specimen, the leader of the procedure describing his actions and the measurements.
You can see a torso and then an arm with like 4 fingers, long fingers.
There is a change in camera angles. Now we see the specimen being more extensively examined.
You can see the torso, part of the shoulder and the arm, and then one full arm laying with the fingers up like that. If this is real, guys, this is totally wild. And this was very common in Russia to not use modern protective equipment like face masks and things like that to protect from contamination.
To cut open what the leader constantly refers to as tissue.
Trying to like cut through the ribs so they can pull some of the internal organs out. Look at that arm with the weird fingers curled up like that. See that?
He also describes parts that are removed as resembling various organs.
Записывайте, достаем внутренние органы, надрезаем похожую на клетчатку внутреннюю ткань.
Look at that arm, fingers.
The camera angle changes again.
And there's like weird scenes and flashes in between the
Finally,
camera
the
cuts
scientists
too that
see
show
the
different
person
things.
with the camera, holding up various samples of the dissection. If this footage is authentic, it represents one of the greatest scientific discoveries of all time. One must wonder where this film was shot and what happened to the specimen seen. If this is footage of a genuine scientific examination, what happened to the results? What did the Soviets learn, and what have they done with that knowledge? Did agents of the KGB have reason to keep this secret for so many years? Certainly there are more questions here than answers.
This documentary actually does a pretty good job of investigating and breaking this
Case in
down.
point, the intriguing film footage we had acquired. Proof, some say, of alien visitation. Being that this material is of such sensational nature, we had many questions regarding its history. Little information was provided us by the black market dealer from whom the film was purchased. It is likely that such materials were kept stored in a holding facility, a vault located beneath KGB headquarters perhaps, reserved only for those with the highest level of security.
Now here comes some of the analysis of the footage.
This former agent was able to confirm interest not only in the 1968 crash near Berezovsky, but in other Soviet attempts to recover UFO documentation and technology. Alien reverse engineering. If the Russians had in fact recovered an extraterrestrial vehicle, as they seem to be doing in this footage, they no doubt would have wanted to benefit from its technology.
And the kicker is the fact that you get troops out there and a cameraman doesn't necessarily mean it's a flying saucer. We need to be a little cautious about jumping to conclusions. Now, I think that film is worth a detailed investigation. Those things cost a lot of money, actually, to go over it. You have different specialists looking at it. You know, are the uniforms correct for the time frame? Is the film actually made in the Soviet Union?
We asked Russian film expert Sergei Goncharov to examine the film for its authenticity. He first explained the background of the film cans.
And this is the name of the factory that manufactures the motion picture film in the city of Pereslavl. This is the type of film type A2, which is the emulsion.
After Sergei examined the cans, he felt that they were authentic and consistent with the area and time period from
So far
which
it
they
lines
had
up.
allegedly come.
Now that we've looked at the cans, the next thing to do was to actually find out if the film itself had any markings on it. Okay, in the very beginning of the film, we have this word, which in Russian says начало, or the beginning, or the start. Now, the next bit of information are these two items, M-A-R-T, Mart, which is the month of March, 1969, letter G for year. So the year of 1969, the month of March. Okay, then we have the two bits of information which says plyonka number 267. Plyonka in Russian means emulsion or film, could denote the reel, the roll, or a batch, and this, of course, is the number. The next thing we see is this bit of information. Совершенно секретно, top secret archive, the KGB logo, and the word archive.
Top secret KGB footage.
Finally, Sergei Goncharov compared the markings on the film itself to what was printed on the cans.
As you notice right here on the edge of the negative, we have the word безопасная пленка, meaning safety film, and type A2 or type A2, which is exactly the information that you have on a can.
So the film and the canisters
He showed
match.
the film to Russian researcher Paul Stonehill.
The colors of the film, the quality, soldier uniforms. Somebody would have to go into special, to make a special effort to make a film that feels like something that was made in 1960s. I've seen a lot of films made in the 1960s, and this film here is almost of the same quality. It's not a 1980s or 1990s film. The KGB officer that had been looking and touching things looks quite genuine. To me, my gut feeling is this is not something that they had made intentionally.
So not a hoax.
You see, of course, it wouldn't be possible to duplicate, as a hoax. You would have to hire some actors and so on. But it was quite well done, aimed against the Americans, so something we never heard of it. So that's also dubious.
Finally, while Mr. Hernandez felt that the film required more investigation, he was impressed and intrigued by it.
Well, I would say that if this is real...
This footage, which seems to depict Russian pathologists dissecting what appears to be a non-human life form, requires further analysis. We then asked film expert Sergei
This part's pretty
if
fascinating,
he thought
too.
the film's characteristics on this reel were consistent with the time period from which it was supposedly shot.
It certainly is consistent with the information on the can. It is negative. It's got the negative perforations. It's exactly what the information on the can indicated.
Sergei explains the significance of a flash frame, an interesting and possibly important characteristic of the film that was discovered.
All right, now, a flash frame, this is, of course, a flash frame is that piece of film that is, when you push the button on the camera and you start exposure and you stop the camera to stop the exposure, and then you restart the camera again, by virtue of inertia, the camera will sometimes expose either a flash of light, or if you point the camera away from the person in front of it, you will see some other subject matter. Those flash frames appear between the takes and sometimes show things and people that are not part of the scene itself. You have people that have nothing to do with the information.
So military people show up in the frames accidentally between the cuts.
You see these people performing a procedure. You have somebody in civilian clothes, people that you have not seen before, as this is in a flash frame segment, which was not meant to be as the procedure that was being photographed.
Mr. Goncharov concludes that while the film's stock and camera techniques are consistent with KGB and Soviet government films of that period, he feels that the discrepancies with the subject matter require closer scrutiny.
Anytime you have subject matter of this type, any additional investigation is worthwhile.
Stuff. If it's real, it's very important.
And this, of course, is typical of Russian-Soviet medicine. I mean, when we think of Chernobyl, just remember back that there was a terrible lapse in any type of protection. It certainly would not happen in the United States. I mean, it would be unheard of.
Next, Dr. Ryan commented on some of the specific medical procedures.
All right, what's happening here is that they're using dissecting scissors to open up the sternum, which is a common procedure at that time. He's using the proper tool. The way they're holding and using the various tools looks correct, which indicates to me these people know what they're doing. I would say there's little doubt that these are actual Russian medical people. Now, if you look closely at this procedure here, which is repeated several times in this footage, what they're doing is removing a piece of material. The one doctor refers to it as an organ or resembling an organ. Then the diener snips off a small sample which is placed in a specimen jar for later analysis. Well, that's exactly what would be done in a forensic case or in the case of scientific research, for instance, if some new species had been discovered. They would remove very small pieces for later chemical and microscopic examination. The lead doctor also mentions a structure he describes as resembling ribs. And here you can see what indeed resembles a rib cage, as if this was the torso of some anthropoid or human-like organism.
Finally, though Dr. Ryan was unable to identify the subject matter, she believes that the techniques were consistent with those practiced in the Soviet Union during the late 1960s. We have little information about the specimen seen here, other than the pathologist's description and the KGB code name Sverdlovsk midget. We wondered, though, how such a being might appear had it been recovered intact. Further investigation and make it much easier to simply write off any UFO account.
So now they dig into the background and authenticity even
This
more.
incredible footage depicts members of the Soviet armed forces and what are believed to be 2 KGB agents inspecting and recovering a crashed flying saucer. Russian author Veniamin Vereshchagin has an idea. Attempting to verify the authenticity of this evidence, we have had the footage and the film itself examined by several experts. We also carefully studied the documents we had procured, which lent further credibility to what we had been told. Among the most telling was this top-secret KGB report specifically referring to Operation Sverdlovsk Midget and describing in detail the recovery operation at Beryozovsky. This document mentions the crashed disc, the organic remains, and the filming itself. There was also this secret order from the Soviet Ministry of Defense requesting assistance from military unit 67527. We looked closely.
Everything tracks, even the paperwork and the patches on the military as authentic.
These patches seem consistent with the patch worn by such Soviet Army air defense companies as military unit
Even the patch
67527.
matches the documentation.
They're all wearing winter coats, which don't appear to have much in the way of insignia on them. And that is not out of character for the winter coats. They would generally not contain much in the way of identification. These are all members of the same unit. I can see that the weapons are AK-type weapons. The main battle weapon of the Russian army, even up through today's date, is the automatic Kalashnikov weapon. Yeah, it's clearly an AK, fixed stock, birch stock, no muzzle brake, milled receiver, no question about it. That also seems to be consistent with the muzzles of the weapons that I can see in this film.
In addition, we had notes from the scientific examination of the recovered organic specimen, which seemed consistent with the soundtrack of the dissection footage. With so many elements in seeming consistency, Vereshchagin's story becomes even more tantalizing and perplexing at the same time. Is it possible the Russians actually recovered an alien craft and its occupant 3 decades ago? In the course of our investigation, our goal was to follow every lead, to search for every scrap of information regarding the incident so named Operation Sverdlovsk Midget. The tenuous paper trail we have reconstructed using recovered government documents led us eventually to a lab of the former All-Union Scientific Research Institute of Biology. In attempting to obtain records on the individuals depicted in the dissection footage, we turned up these additional documents. 3 death certificates, all dated March the 24th, 1969, within a week after records indicate the examination was performed. Cause of death for all 3.
So all 3 doctors died of cerebral hemorrhage, just like the Virginia UFO soldier that touched the alien, took him to the hospital.
A private teaching center known as the Moscow Medical Institute. That this is the same facility as seen in the film footage becomes obvious with a comparison of such fixtures as the stonework tables and the distinctive tile.
So they contracted some kind of a pathogen from doing the autopsy and not being protected, and they died of cerebral hemorrhages.
Remain unanswered.
So guys, that's the entire footage, including the footage of what could be an actual UFO crash recovery that happened in Russia, as well as an alien autopsy. This seems to line up with what Danny Sheehan saw when he got access to Project Blue Book files in the National Archive under top secret circumstances. I think this is totally fascinating. I want to know what you guys all think down in the comments below, so let me know your thoughts. And when President Trump comes out with all of the UFO and alien files from here in the United States, are we going to be seeing a lot more of this? We're going to have to wait and find out.